Hi, Taylor T. Carlson, and starting on the channel today, I'm going to be doing more top 10 lists and ranking lists. I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU for short, and well, the films of the franchise have unfortunately been halted due to the recent pandemic in the world. The MCU is still thriving in the form of the Disney Plus TV shows that are coming out, and I thought what I would do for this list would be ranking the top 10 villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I'm only including villains who are definitively villains. I'm not including characters who come over and become Avengers, so you're not going to see Winter Soldier or Scarlet Witch on here. Morally ambiguous characters I'm going to be a little more open with. That may actually have given away my number one pick on the list, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started. At number 10 on this list, we have Obadiah Stane, the Ironmonger, as portrayed by Jeff Bridges. This guy was the first villain in the entire MCU as far as central movie antagonists go, and Jeff Bridges, one of the all-time great Hollywood actors, absolutely does not disappoint here. This guy had familial ties to Tony Stark and Stark Industries, and Tony Stark wanted to get out of the weapons industry because he had a near-death experience and saw what his weapons were being used for. Obadiah didn't take too kindly to it, and by the end of the movie, these two are in a battle to the death. And of course, Jeff Bridges just steals the show in any movie he's in, and he's certainly no exception in the first Iron Man movie. We needed a great antagonist to kick off the MCU, and Obadiah did that in spades. At number 9 on our list, we have Quentin Beck, Mysterio, as portrayed by Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal has always been a very underrated actor, and Mysterio was always one of the rogues gallery villains from Spider-Man who'd never been adapted into a movie, so when I heard they were putting him into Spidey's second MCU adventure, I was ecstatic. This movie's first half absolutely does not prepare you for the second half because there's so much deception at work here. That's what Mysterio does. He's a master of deception and illusions. He lures us into a false sense of security about halfway through the movie, and then everything just does a perfect 180-degree turn, and things just take a turn for the worst in every possible way. And if the post-credit scene is any indication, it goes to show that this guy might even have more pull than we may have realized before. At number 8 on the list, we have Hela, as portrayed by Cate Blanchett. Now, one thing a lot of people had complained about with the MCU is there weren't really enough strong female characters, certainly barely any female villains. With the arrival of Hela, that all changed. Hela not only gave us one of the most memorable female characters in the MCU, she's one of the best villains in the entire franchise. An estranged sister to Thor and Loki, and appearance had pretty much been covered up over the years. She came back onto the scene just as an absolutely ruthless executioner who took over Asgard with little effort, pretty much slayed the Warriors 3, and sent everyone into hiding. Thor was not able to defeat Hela, and in fact the only way our heroes won was by resurrecting an ancient evil and sacrificing the kingdom of Asgard. I mean, it's debatable as to whether or not she's even really dead, but Cate Blanchett just chews up the scenery in every single scene she's in. Hela remains one of the fan favorites when it comes to MCU villains. Number 7 on our list, we have Justin Hammer, as portrayed by Sam Rockwell. Imagine a billionaire playboy like Tony Stark who has all of the brains but absolutely none of the morality. If that was the case, you'd end up with Justin Hammer. This guy is, charismatic, funny, and enjoyable, but he's ruthless and he'll do anything and sacrifice anything in his way to accomplish his goals, whether it involves sabotaging Tony Stark's work or going out of his way to break a criminal out of jail and arm him with the latest technology. This guy, despite being a ruthless villain, he's actually quite funny too, and that's what really makes him one of the more memorable MCU villains. I mean, Iron Man 2 is not really a fan favorite with a lot of fans of the MCU, but the one place you cannot deny the strength of this movie is in Sam Rockwell's performance as Justin Hammer. Number 6 on our list, we have Thanos, as portrayed by Josh Brolin. You probably thought this guy was going to be a little higher on the list. He's certainly one of my favorite MCU villains, but I do think there are some that are a bit more worthy. Josh Brolin portrays the character very well, actually managing to make this man who wants to commit universal genocide of 50% of all the people in existence somewhat sympathetic due to some of the things he and his people and his planet had been through. Thanos is a ruthless villain with no sympathy, but again, you do take some sympathy on this guy for what he's been through, and in some ways, his plan actually isn't all that bad. Thanos definitely steals the show. He wasn't really in enough movies outside of little cameos and teasers, but when he finally took center stage in Infinity War and Endgame, he did not disappoint. At number 5 on our list, we have Ego the Living Planet, as portrayed by Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell, another one of the all-time great actors in Hollywood. This guy can play any role, and an MCU villain was no exception. Ego has some ruthless plans in mind with an expansion that's going to eradicate the universe as we know it. But for some reason, we like the guy because he's just so charismatic, likable, and even manages to win over Star-Lord with a lot of his lies and promises. Did I mention he's actually the estranged biological father of Star-Lord, which makes this an even more complicated process for our heroes. Again, I adore Kurt Russell, and this isn't only one of my favorite MCU performances, it's one of my favorite Kurt Russell performances. He steals the show here, no questions asked. Number 4 on our list, we have Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, as portrayed by Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton got his start in comedies, and that was what he was best known for a while. He took the role of Batman, much to the chagrin of a lot of fans, but won people over and ended up taking on more serious roles over the years. So when I heard he was going to play the Vulture in the MCU, I was ecstatic. He did not disappoint in this role. This version of the Vulture is a scavenger who takes objects from discarded alien technology, namely the Chitauri from the Battle of New York in the first Avengers film, and he's repurposed this technology and sold it on the black market, and also used it to create his own Vulture suit. Now, this guy's not bent on world domination. He's not someone who really wants to hurt anyone he doesn't have to. He's just doing this job to support and feed his family. Did I mention his daughter is Peter Parker's prom date? Yeah. So, makes things even more shocking when we figure out who she's related to. Michael Keaton rarely disappoints, and as the Vulture, he stands as one of the big bads in the MCU who's certainly memorable. And number 3 on our list, Baron Helmut Zemo, as portrayed by Daniel Bruhl. What if I told you there was a villain in the MCU who broke up the Avengers, sent them on the run as criminals, manipulated them into fighting each other and trying to kill each other, and he did it with no superpowers and no technology. That's what Zemo did, and that's why he's one of the strongest villains in the MCU, despite a lack of powers and technology. He's a master of manipulation, and by the end of Civil War, it's like things aren't back to normal. Even after Zemo's in captivity, the effects, everyone's still reeling from everything he did. He's since made a comeback in the Falcon and Winter Soldier MCU Disney Plus TV series, and getting to explore more of this character is something I'm thrilled about. Number 2 on our list, we have Killmonger, as portrayed by Michael B. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan had previously portrayed a not-so-well-received version of the Human Torch in that Fox Fantastic Four movie from 2015. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. I'm glad that Mr. Jordan got another chance in the MCU because he played a great villain here. He was abandoned as a child on the mean streets of the ghettos of the United States and rose up to try to get people to rise up and take their place, take back their rightful place in the world. And when he comes to Wakanda and defeats T'Challa to take over the kingdom, he splits Wakanda right in half, with plenty of people remaining loyal to the believed to be deceased former king, who was also the Black Panther, and many people who support Killmonger's more militant directions, allowing these warmongers to rise from the shadows, conquer the world, and get away from Wakanda's former isolationist policies. The social themes and commentary of Black Panther are one of the things that make it one of the best films in the MCU, and Killmonger is a great villain. I really wish he'd gotten to stick around for more movies, but he leaves an impact here. And the number 1 villain from the MCU, could it possibly have been anyone else? Loki, as portrayed by Tom Hiddleston. One of the most morally ambiguous and conflicted characters in the entire MCU. I'm still considering him a villain despite having helped our heroes because he generally acts in his own best interest. Tom Hiddleston gives this character life. I mean, he had the plan to take over the earth and rule it as a god, making everyone be his subjects. But at the same time, he has his own personal agenda. There are times where he acts as a hero. There are times he acts as a villain. There's no one in the MCU more morally ambiguous, or for that matter, charismatic. The guy still manages to be funny and likable, and one of my favorite characters to see on the screen despite all the terrible deeds that he's committed. There are some great villains in the MCU, and there are some not so great villains. But Tom Hiddleston's performance as Loki is the absolute best of all MCU villains. I'm looking forward to seeing an alternate version of the character show up in the Loki Disney Plus MCU TV series, which premieres in a few months. Who do you think the best villain in the MCU is? Did your favorite make the cut on here? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. I'm always posting new videos. And give this one a like if you found it helpful or interesting. I'm Taylor T. Carlson. See you next time.